What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode on The Black Experience, y'all. Welcome back to Season 5. It has been a great season. As this season ends, I want to express my gratitude towards everyone out there. All new supporters, welcome to the journey. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in, watching, listening, at whatever time zone, whatever you may be doing. And all my old supporters from day one, thank you so much. You know who you are. I appreciate you guys. As the year has been wrapping up, I have a very special guest with me today. And I've been saying that on every episode. But today's episode is even more special because the resume that I'm about to say, y'all, and I mean, it blows me away. My guest today is Miss West Seattle, USA for 2024. She is a model, and she also is a lawyer. So without further ado, let's put our hands together and let's bring up Elle. How you doing, Elle?
I'm good, Hermes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
How does it feel when kind of people kind of read your resume and you just kind of hear the different things that you're doing right now?
Honestly, I'm kind of used to it by now. To be perfectly honest, it's always like, that shock factor.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing is, remaining grounded, being humble. And I've been extremely blessed to be able to honestly pursue whatever my heart desires, right? So that's why you have the mix of the lawyering, modeling, pageantry, right? So
Yeah.
I've been able to do all of that. So more than that, I'm blessed, humbled, and when people ask me about it, I use it as a point to tell them, life is short.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you want to do, go after what you want to go after, and pursue your dreams, whatever that may be. So
I love that. That's literally the motivation I've had for the past 4 years since COVID of like, life is short. You never know what can happen in the world. Something could just switch up and, you want to leave as best of a legacy and impact you can,
You're certainly right.
So,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we get started, tell us a little bit, how's your day been so far? Because you're just I can only imagine how busy you are every day.
Yeah, I mean, my life as an attorney is just crazy. There's never really a dull moment. And I think I was discussing with you earlier, I had a case that was supposed to go to trial last week. So we were preparing for that. And the thing about, preparing for trial, obviously you have to do the legwork beforehand. And, sometimes when cases get dismissed, it doesn't happen until, a point right before trial, right? So either way, you have to be prepared to go, right?
Yeah.
So I'm preparing myself, I'm preparing my team, like, we're going to trial on this case. So that was a bit crazy. I ended up working on Thanksgiving. So I am happy that I will not be doing that for this Christmas. So actually today's been one of my calmer days. Things are winding down as the holidays roll around. I'm looking forward to actually spending my holidays, relaxing and winding down. So looking forward to the week. But, of course, there's always something that can arise, and that usually does, but I'm hoping that it does not.
Yeah. Because that profession, I mean, it's kind of like a firefighter and stuff, where it's like, it doesn't matter if there's a holiday or whatever, anything can come and you got to be right there.
You're always putting out fires.
Yeah.
So, especially because I practice criminal defense. Some practice areas are a bit different and they're a little more, lax. But for me, I take, my role seriously, especially when we're talking about people who, sometimes are facing up to life imprisonment, right?
Wow.
And we're often their last line of defense, in terms of ensuring that they have the best outcome possible. So the stakes are high for us. We take that responsibility, very seriously, especially because we literally have someone's life in our hands. So we move with that same urgency and treat everyone as if their case is important, because it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as a little side note, I am a big fan. I don't know if you watch the YouTube channel, but Law and Crime News Network, and they present like all these, like they drop like 10-minute videos, sometimes 25, 30-minute videos of like cases such as, whatever you hear, current events. So I'm a big fan of them. So to get someone who is kind of an attorney on the other side, from the civilian side of things is pretty cool. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, Elle, if you want to kind of talk about, again, you have an impressive resume, and every journey has a beginning somewhere. So if you want to start a little bit, but talk about your background, where you're from, a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood upbringing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm from West Seattle, Admiral Way, hence Miss West Seattle, USA, right? Got to bring it back home.
Come Come on.
I was raised by my grandmother with all of my siblings. There's 6 of us total. At some point, my cousins came in to stay with us as well. So I was not raised in a 2-parent household. I went to Madison Middle School, so right there in West Seattle. West Seattle High School, literally a West Seattle girl through and through, right?
I love it. And you're representing them at the highest level right now,
right, too. Right. I went to Washington State University for my bachelor's, Johns Hopkins for my master's, and then did my Juris Doctorate at Seattle University. After I graduated Seattle University, I worked for a law firm for a bit, and then I opened my own law firm in the middle of COVID, by the way.
Are you kidding me?
This just goes to show how just insane I am. Right?
Yeah.
I have tunnel vision. I was just talking to one of my friends the other day, ironically, and I'm like, I just realized that I opened my firm in COVID, and it didn't dawn on me until about 2 months ago, right? And we just hit our 3-month anniversary, so all this time has passed, and I had no regard for when I opened my law firm, right? That's how just motivated and how deep my tunnel vision was, and you know how big of a vision I had. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I have 2 older sisters, an older brother, and then a younger sister and a younger brother. They all have children. I have tons of nieces and nephews. I think we're probably at about 12 or 13 at this point.
Plenty of entertainment when you get home, huh?
Plenty of entertainment. Plenty of entertainment. I don't do much babysitting. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
There's enough for me to scratch that itch for now.
Wow. You know, I mean, growing up with your grandma, and not being in a two-parent household, I mean, did that initially have any impacts on you, kind of emotionally at all, or did you kind of just accept it and be like, you know, I love grandma. Grandma loves me, and she's doing what she got to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that our childhood really shapes our character and who we are, right? A lot of what we experience in those formative years affects our character as a person, and it has a huge plays a huge factor in who we are as adults, right? So yes, it has impacted my life in many ways, but you know, I treat my grandmother like my mom, you know, and I call her my mom, and that's what I consider her. I've never seen her, you know, any other way. But to answer your question on a broader schedule, the way that I was raised and how I was raised actually feeds into where I am today, right? In that determination. A lot of my family did not go to college. I was the first lawyer in my family.
Wow.
Yeah, first lawyer in my family. And it's not like, so for me in terms of college as well, like I'm a first generation college student, right? So, and because we didn't have the means, but I knew I wanted to go to college, that's kind of when I started. Like, if I want this, I have to figure out how to get it, right? And I didn't necessarily have the tools because my family didn't have that history, right, of higher education. So they didn't necessarily know what to do or how to guide me, right? But I got the thought in my head. I said, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to seek out resources to, you know, to achieve that goal. And I think that feeds into my level of determination, my level of grit, you know, and my attitude that I don't take anything for granted. But at the same time, I'm always extremely grounded and extremely humble because I know where I come from, right? And I think that plays a huge factor in it as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. When you go back to like, it's like you know, when people are like, they keep asking why until they get to the root cause of whatever it is they're dealing with. You know, it's like you go back in time and be like, okay, what is it that motivates me? What is it that pushes me? And for me as well, too, it's like family does have an impact even on starting this podcast and doing what I got to do and what I did in school, too. So that's what's up. I mean, would you say then, because, I mean, growing up with your grandma and you do have older siblings, too, was there anyone in particular when you were younger that was like kind of like a role model, or was it like a celebrity? Like, who was it that I guess had an influence at you, if at all?
It's ironic that you asked that because people ask me that all the time, and I'm just like, I can't point to anyone that I was motivated by. You know, I'm Christian, right? So I think that we all have a purpose here, and I think that we are all born with certain gifts to assist us in effectuating that purpose. And I think in terms of, you know, my ability to persist through adversity and, you know, to reach these goals and my level of determination, I think that was part of a gift that I was given. But more importantly, I would say to accurately answer your question, I would rephrase it a little bit to say, what motivated me, right? And a lot of that goes into my circumstances in terms of what I just explained to you about how I was raised, right? How I didn't have, anyone to, and my family was very well-meaning, right? It's just they did not have the requisite knowledge to help me through that. So when you come and you talk about creating generational wealth, right, or just ensuring that you create, generations of just like healthy heirs and things of that nature, right? It has to start somewhere. At some point, when you're talking about generational curses and things that carry on through, families, generation over generation, somebody has to be the person to stop that, right? And I think that that's what I was tasked with. So when it comes to, I feel like the onus is on me, especially if, I'm thinking about, having a family and things of that nature, to ensure that, I am, healthy myself, right? To make sure that I have these tools that if my child ultimately wants to go to school, or my child ultimately wants to achieve A, B, and C, I can assist them and I can guide them in the right direction, right? Same with my nieces and nephews. Yeah, so I would say it's a what, and that's my what.
It's funny because you kind of just tapped into one of the questions in there, which is the what and the motivation part of like what wakes you up every day. Because I love asking people that, just because I get different responses, and I don't know, it's something that I haven't thought of my whole life, but recently, again, it's like, what is it, me also being a Christian, it's like, what is it every day I wake up, what am I trying to, what am I going after, what is the purpose of today, and in the long run, so I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
In terms of, and we're going to get into the whole pageant stuff and all that other fun stuff, but on the educational side, were any of your siblings kind of in that attorney? Did they go through that attorney route, or where did that come from? Where did that interest come from? Was it like a show like Judge Judy,
Oh, geez. I remember from a very young child, I used to, I was always, I don't want to say criticized, but my family used to always make fun of me because I wanted to argue all the time.
About anything?
Right.
Like, what, like argue about what?
Just general things, right? You could say the sky was blue, and I'm like, no, it's purple because of this.
Just because? Just
because. I found it to be fun. But I don't really think that that desire really bloomed as early as I can remember. Would probably be, I want to say high school. I did this mock trial program at Seattle University School of Law, ironically, because I ended up going there to get my Juris Doctorate. And the entire program consisted of like a mock trial, right? So you spent the entire summer preparing for kind of like the final project, which is going to happen at the end of the summer, right? So opening statements, closing arguments, cross, direct, impeachment, all of those different aspects. And once I finished that program, I was like, I absolutely loved doing this, right? And, a lot of people don't like being in the limelight, right? And they don't like being up in front of people, public speaking. And I think that
stage fright.
Exactly. And I think that was one of the first times I was exposed to. I actually like being up here. Like, I'm a performer, and to a certain extent, when you're a litigator or a trial attorney, you do have to perform, right? And you have to. I think the best trial attorneys are comfortable in the courtroom, right? So that was kind of like my first introduction to it, and then it kind of morphed a bit. When I went to Washington State University, I was a mentor for incoming students who attended schools in impoverished areas. And that was really when my, community service and, activism in that realm really started. So I think I was maybe 17, 18 at that time.
Wow.
And so Washington State University recognized that students who attended college or high schools in impoverished areas were less likely to, matriculate through undergrad, right? So they kind of put these programs together where they assigned mentors to mentees. And we would do everything as, far as connecting them with, services that they needed, monitoring their GPA, being a liaison, right? So connecting them to counseling services. Maybe they're having trouble with financial aid, and kind of assisting them in that way. And that was when I thought, I was just like, well, I appreciate the fact that the university, is watching their statistics, right? And they're trying to, find a solution. But in my mind, I'm like, these are more so reactive measures to a deeper problem. And I'm like, well, where can we be proactive at? Right. The issue is with public education and education policy. Right. So for me, I'm just like, really, it should be a situation where they don't need us, right? They don't need mentors that are providing the extra assistance because they were adequately educated at, the high school, middle school level, so that they are prepared to, and they can ultimately matriculate through, undergrad. So that's when I started looking into like going into education policy. And although I didn't need to go to law school to do that, I think that it provided, relevant legal knowledge and kind of relevant skills that I would need, interpreting the law, things of that nature, that would ultimately make me successful at doing that. But I told myself, well, I don't want to do a disservice to the students that I'm going to be making policies for. And so at that point, I said, okay, I am going to go to law school, but I'm going to put a pin in that, and I'm going to be a teacher first. And the reason why I did that is because my issue then and my issue now still with education policymakers specifically is that, they're no longer in the classroom, so they don't know what's relevant for students in this day and age in the classroom, even more so for students of color, right? Or they've never been in the classroom to know what's relevant. Yet you're making policies for these students that are very well going to impact.
That's going to last years too.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I said, I'm going to go ahead and get some boots on the ground. And I went to San Antonio to teach. So I taught for 2 years in Teach for America, which is a program that specifically works in impoverished areas. I taught middle school there. I knew at that point, because, Teach for America was at least a 2-year commitment. So I knew I was going to do my 2 years, and then I was going to go ahead and go to law school. So, I tell people, I'm like, my passion for education is what got me to law school. It's not what kept me there, because when I got there, I started prosecuting misdemeanor cases, and I was like, yeah, you're a litigator. That thing that you felt in high school when when you did that mock trial program at Seattle U, there was a reason why, right? So that's when I ultimately, pivoted to litigation. But I still very much so have, passion for education and passion for community service as well. And while I was actually at Seattle University, I started an organization called Legal Advocates Empowering Youth. And there we did some work in like the low income housing communities, high schools that were located in areas of lower income, and kind of did like know your rights, seminars and things of that nature. So I'm like, well, I don't want to go into education policy, but I still had, a passion for it. So I was exercising it that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you did the mentorship part,
yeah,
especially for when you see like, Black boys and girls and just being part of that. I mean, how did that feel when you were doing that, when you were like mentoring these kids that might, end up pursuing a similar field as you or a different one?
Yeah, I mean, it felt great. For one, because I had a sense of purpose, and I think that I was supposed to be there at that specific time, right? And then also, it's like and although I was blessed to go to a school in a very affluent area, I still, appreciated the fact that I was doing this work. Right. And it made me feel like I had a purpose. Like I said, I felt like I belonged there, and that was where I was supposed to be at that time. And it really resonated with me when the statistics came back, with the students that I was working with in terms of their GPAs and things. And I'm like, the work that you're doing here is actually very, meaningful. So that was enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I have a lot of friends actually in West Seattle that moved to West Seattle. I used to live right over here, Yesler Terrace area. I don't know if you know the area. But when they had the whole deconstruction and they were relocating everyone, a lot of my good friends went to West Seattle. A lot of them went to Rainier Vista. We moved up north and stuff like that. And, to hear West Seattle again from you brings me joy because of the amount of friends I've had, the track meets we've had there, how we've competed against you guys, but also just the community that we had in Yesler, and then the community that's there now. Like I've visited a few times and stuff, but I do wish we could all unite again. But West Seattle is an amazing spot.
Yeah,
I like it. So
it is.
Just a little side note that I wanted to put out there myself. But You kind of just tapped into this a little bit ago, but motivation and why. What is it? Because from what you said, your faith seems to play a big role in, having a purpose here on earth, waking you up and keeping you going and your belief in God. Is there something, is that what would you say is your driving force? Like, let's say, like you were supposed to go to trial the other day, you were saying, and you didn't, and you have those kind of like tough days, those challenging days. Mm-hmm. What is it that drives you and keeps you going despite, life's up and down?
For one, I think it's purpose. Where when we don't have the strength, I believe that God carries us. That's first and foremost, right? And especially when you're in alignment with your purpose here. But I think also on top of that is I think that like I said, everybody was put here for a specific purpose, right? I'm here in this position because I can reach people that you can't, right? As an attorney, mm-hmm. You can reach people that I cannot. So the people that I feel like I'm assigned to in terms of, affecting their lives, I take that duty very seriously. And I think a lot of it, like I said, a lot of, the cases that we have, a good number of them have very serious implications. People potentially being taken away from their families, right? Children potentially being taken away from their families, being incarcerated, for a lot of cases, what is a lengthy amount of time, what that does to somebody's psyche, right? What that does to someone's living situation and ultimately how it affects, their future. So I realized that I've been placed in a very important role, mm-hmm. And I take that job seriously. But, also there's a balance to that because I have to make sure that in order to, continue to perform at such a high level, I have to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not all
exactly,
go. I'm always working. This is what I have to do. I have to look out for myself. Right. So gym, work-life balance, ensuring that I'm taking time for myself and to do things outside of work. But I know that, once I step into that office, it's go time, mm-hmm. right? And I love doing it. That's another aspect of it. And that's the fortunate part about having my own firm, right? I kind of got to choose which areas I wanted to practice in, right? So that certainly helps.
Yeah.
And in the results as well, right? We do great work. And, I would like to think that my firm is generally regarded as a very, high performing firm. You can look at the reviews if you want. You can
maybe I've already seen them.
Maybe, right? But, and I think that shows. And, we just keep churning at it and, mm-hmm. Doing the work that we do. And I think that as long as you're a well-intentioned person and you're moving, out of a good place and with a good heart, it'll always come back.
You said rest and work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
These are terms we hear a lot. Elle, how do you balance? Is there balance? Like, how do you even find rest when you're so? Because I feel like especially now during the holiday season, everyone's kind of shopping and everyone just seems stressful. Forget just the holiday season. Usually people just seem stressful. How do people find rest? Is there any tips that you do or any tricks that you like to do to find rest amidst all the chaos?
One of my biggest things is once I step out of the office, my brain is shut off as it pertains to work, right? If I'm committing to work on a particular day, then, absolutely I will be in that mind frame. But once I leave, I'm not bringing any of it home. Mm. And I think that's extremely important because, as attorneys, we can get very emotionally attached to our cases, and that can permeate through other aspects of your life, which are, not so healthy, especially when it becomes a recurring thing, right? A common occurrence. So I think that's one thing. I can tell you that I get my 8 hours of sleep.
Every night?
Oh, yeah. 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours of sleep. But I have to be extremely productive when I go in for the work day, right? Because there aren't, really there aren't enough hours in the day. But I think I do well. Learning how to delegate, right? So I'm not the only person, right? There are people who work with me who I can delegate tasks to and things of that nature. So that certainly helps. I don't do everything.
Yeah.
Another thing is working out, right? I believe in health. I believe in eating healthy. I work out 6 days a week. I get up at 5 a.m. before I go to work to go to the gym.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm blown away. The more I learn from you, I'm just like, who is this person?
Superwoman. No.
Seriously. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, you know, and I'll kind of talk about this as well. But the reason why I picked up, you know, pageantry in the first place was to, and golfing as well, was to get away from or do something outside of the law. Mm-hmm. As attorneys, it's easy for us to become consumed and for that to become our personality. And I tell people, I'm like, being a lawyer is what I do. It is not who I am, right? I have all of these other things, right? So I'm not, you know, afraid to venture out and do things, but I also keep a very tight eye on if I am, you know, overstretching myself. And I guess the biggest thing biggest piece of advice I would give to people is learn how to say no. It's simply put, right? If it's going to result in, you know, an overextension of yourself and put you in a position where you're not making good on your obligations or your commitments for one, but also you're tying yourself out, where you're not operating at a high level, that's when it becomes problematic. And, you know, for me, that's even more so of a motivation for me to ensure that I'm taking care of myself, because like I said, as a trial attorney, we have to operate at a very high level, right? Yeah. If I'm stretched in 20 different directions and I'm a master at all of these things, right? What does that say for functionality, right? And whether or not I'm able to function at a high level. And I keep a very close eye on those things. You know, my mental health, my physical health, those are things that I monitor. And I'm not afraid to say no if I feel like I'm being stretched too far. So boundaries.
Yeah. Because, you know, I've even heard too, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. When you're saying no to something, an opportunity or whatever it is, you're saying yes to something else. It could be your health. And health is wealth. And so that's something that I like to, I like to say it. It's another thing to do it, though. You know what I mean? It's another thing to have that plastered on your wall, but another thing to do it on weekends, you know, when most people are like, you know, I think this can be a cheat day or cheat weekend, whatever, and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, to an extent, if it's, you know, with balance. But I like that. Those are some tips for me. So I try to stay consistent with working out and everything, but I don't know about, you know, 6 days a week at 5 a.m., you know?
I mean, it also has to do with the fact that, you know, I compete in pageants and I also model, right? So it might be a little overkill for most people.
You know? But you're kind of used to that kind of heavy, brutal schedule.
I am. And I function pretty well in it. And it's the way that I get along. So
I love it.
Yeah.
When I was looking over your resume, Chief Justice Steve Gonzalez, I saw him on there.
Yes, absolutely love him.
I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about your experience working with him, and if there was any things you observed from him, his approach to justice, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, you know, not only is he my former employer, technically, I also consider him my, you know, mentor and also a really good friend. And I did some clerking for him when I was in law school. So that was my first introduction to him. And one of the things that I admired is that he sticks to his values and he is a person of integrity. And I think that matters, especially if you are in a position that he is, to remain true to who you are, and your values stood out to me, right? That was one big thing that he taught me, regardless of, you know, where you go. And he didn't directly say this, but I'm watching him, right? For people that I look up to, people that I'm inspired by, I watch how people move. And especially with him being, you know, a person of color on the highest court in Washington State, I'm like, okay, you know, what can I learn from this, right? And he's just remained consistent. He's remained, you know, true to himself. And you can even look through some of, you know, his opinions that he's issued while on the Supreme Court, and you can see that they are consistent with his values, right? He didn't get on the bench and switch up, right? And I think you have to appreciate that. So that's something that really inspired me about him.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the integrity part and staying true to your word and not switching up. These are things that you've implemented into your own approach now with your own firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I tell people. I mean, as long as you're a good person, right? it will always come back full circle. And, I don't want to set a unrealistic expectation, especially as a business owner. Right. In terms of,
you're getting people excited right now. They're like, oh, yes, I am a good person. Got success coming my way now.
Right. But I mean, I think being a good person goes a long way. Mm-hmm. And I've always, led with, people and, customer satisfaction, client satisfaction before money. Right. Which also in the reverse means, okay, just because there's a nice check coming, that doesn't mean we're going to take this case. Right.
Wow.
And I've turned down cases where that I thought, went against my morals and my values.
Yeah.
Right. And on the same end of it, if I believed in a case and people didn't necessarily, have, the money or something like that to retain us up front, right? It's like, okay, I work with that person and let's see what we can do because I believe in you, right? And I will go the extra mile for my clients in that way. But it's ironic that you bring that up because, when people reach out to my firm, we always ask them, we're like, how did you find out about us? We ask them later on in the process, why did you ultimately choose us? And some people will volunteer that information before we even get to ask the question. But it's overwhelming how often people say, I can tell that you're a good person, right? And you're extremely down to earth. You're real with me. You're a person of integrity, and I can see that. And on top of the skill set, right? But I mean, there are a lot of skilled attorneys out there, right? So it's like, and we're located in downtown Seattle. So it's like, you can go down the street and you can probably find another very high skilled attorney.
Is there. Absolutely.
Right. And I've had people tell me, I've talked to a handful of attorneys before I got on the phone with you, and we want to hire you because of X, Y, and Z, right? You're a person of integrity. You're very down to earth. I feel like I can speak to you. You're very personable, and I trust you with my case. So that's been an overwhelming theme with the feedback that we've gotten. So I do think it goes a long way. And like I said, as long as you're moving in a genuine way, the money will always come, right? That's not necessarily the thing that's at the forefront, of my mind. And of course, like I said, I don't want to set a realistic expectation. As a business owner, we have operating costs, right? And we have our bottom line, right? Yeah. But I'm never putting profits over, my integrity or people when it comes down to it. If clients are satisfied, if you do good work, they're going to continue to come, right? But just operate it, from a place of integrity, be yourself, and I think everything else will take care of itself in that regard.
I really love how you said that. And I say that because I don't know if you've heard this before, but in it could be in sports, it could be in your field and whatever it is, but a lot of people sometimes can say, and I've heard this before, of, to make it to the top or to be the best of whatever it is that you're doing, you got to be a little bit of a dirty player, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. You got to be, rubbing elbows with the right people, and you kind of have to, be a little bit selfish. Mm-hmm. I guess when you hear that, how much credibility to give that, and how much is that true in the attorney world?
I can definitely tell you that there are people who adopt that mindset, and some people who act in accordance with that, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I can tell you that, I've gotten to where I've gotten without having to engage in any of it, right? And for me, I think I have, more so internally, a heightened responsibility, right? Because I'm tied back to that purpose, right? Because ultimately, it's my job to, when people see me, to be that reflection of Christ, right?
Wow.
So if I'm moving in this way or that way, I'm in trouble. Let's just say that, right? So I kind of have this heightened, what I think responsibility, at least something that I attribute to myself in that way. So I just, I don't move that way, and I don't think it's necessary. And I think, there's a way to get where you want without stepping on people.
That compromising your integrity and all
Yeah.
that good stuff. And it goes, again, you're taking it right back to your morals, right back to your faith again. So
Yeah.
I can see how important that is in your life. Respect. I love that,
Thank you.
honestly. And actually, this is a great segue because, again, the way you've approached it has led to success, not in your firm and the awards. And that's what we're going to get into. The awards, y'all, that Elle has won, man. And I gotta look at this because, oh, my gosh. So you've received the Jeff Robinson Equity and Racial Justice Award. And on top of that, you won the American Bar Association Moot Court Appellate competition that you competed in.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about each of these awards, the competition and the award, and how did it feel to win both of them, and kind of how that even happened.
Yeah, so both awards I actually won while I was in law school. The Jeff Robinson Award is, given to someone who is committed to racial justice, right? And, as I told you, my first work in that regard started when I was 17, 18 at Washington State University, right? With, mentoring students of color, right? And then I go to San Antonio and I start, teaching students, right, who live in impoverished areas or go to school in impoverished areas. And then you talk about the organization that I started while I was at Seattle University, still remaining connected, right, to students of color, right, and still remaining, an active agent of trying to close that gap, that achievement gap, right. The gap that there is as it pertains to, knowing your rights and just law generally, right? Which, I think that there's just a huge, deficit in those communities of, basic things such as what to do when you're pulled over, right? And, so really it was, the fact that, the school and, everyone who voted in that process, which I believe I don't know if it was a closed community to Seattle U or if they opened it up to other people, but they were able to see my commitment to racial justice through the work that I did.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Jeff Robinson, I mean, to receive any award with his name on it is such a huge honor.
Tell us a little bit more about him, because I don't know too much about Jeff Robinson.
So I believe that he was really big, as it pertains to racial justice and equity, right? That was one of the biggest things that he was an agent of, which is why the award was ultimately named after him, right? So that's
won, yeah.
Right. So that's why I say, like, to just even be a recipient of an award with his name on it, just considering the work that he did, it was a huge honor to me. So that was that one. And then the American Bar Association. So Seattle University has these competitions that they do with their law students. I believe you start maybe in your second year of law school, and they're optional. And essentially, it's a series of, I would say, debate competitions. So we argue what we call appellate cases.
Okay.
And they're, I believe it was based on a fact pattern that was ultimately an actual case that went up to Division I or maybe Division II, the Court of Appeals in Washington State. So we used a real case, but the court had already ruled on it. So it consists of, preparing your oral argument before a panel of, I believe, 3 mock judges. So it was kind of like a closed universe, and they would score, right? So I would go up against one student, and then whoever scored the highest would advance to the next level, right? And it kind of continued on that path until I ultimately won the competition, which is a pretty drawn out process.
Come on.
I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed beating all those students?
I enjoyed
demolishing them?
I told you, I like public speaking. So I had a good time doing that. And, I do try to go back to Seattle U and judge some of those competitions now as an attorney, now that I'm in my practice. So.
Oh, my gosh. Have you ever been part of like a debate club, anything like that in school?
I was never part of a debate club.
I think you do pretty well.
I was like, should I have been part of a debate club? No, but actually one of the pretty early signs that I was really good at public speaking was when I told you about I did the competition at Seattle University when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I took this public speaking class at Washington State University, and I remember we had a project where we had to do something that involved, public speaking, and the whole class, after I finished, they were like, my professor came up to me, he was like, and I was like,
where you been this whole time?
I was like, maybe I'm pretty good at this thing, right? So that was the Appellate competition, American Bar Association Appellate competition. So there was just multiple rounds, us going up and arguing our cases, studying the facts, studying the law, answering the judges' questions and things of that nature. So yeah.
Okay, I gotta ask this because I used to have this when I was younger. I don't really have it too much now, but stage fright. A lot of people go through that stage fright of whenever they are, giving a presentation in class or whatever, and all eyes are on them and the teacher's looking at them and he's grading them or whatever. I mean, what advice would you give to people that are maybe not as comfortable naturally as you are when they're in front of 100, 200, 1,000, whatever amount of people?
For me, if I know that I have adequately prepared and if I am confident in what I'm talking about, that gives me a boost of confidence, if that makes sense, right? I also, especially when it comes to preparing for trials and things of that nature, public speaking in any regard, I don't think that people should stick to an outline. And I always, when I judge competitions at Seattle University, I always tell students, I'm just like, have your general notes and kind of where you want to go. Because if you have a script of every single word that you are going to say, for one, you're going to be stuck to that script. And you're not going to have as much flexibility because you're going to want to hang on to it. You're not going to have flexibility to pivot when you kind of have a chance to elaborate on certain things, or when there's a curveball that gets thrown at you, right? You're going to have to know how to navigate those situations. So I would say preparation is key, right? I would say in preparing and also being confident in what you're communicating, it brings a different level of confidence as well. And then also maybe just having a rough outline of your talking points, right? It gives you flexibility. It also forces you to be knowledgeable enough on what you're talking about that you can kind of traverse into different areas if you do get certain, questions or things like that. They're outside of the realm of what you had actually prepared, right? So I think that does the trick.
Yeah, and I second that because there have been presentations in class, and for me, and maybe for other people it might work better, but whenever I do have a script, I read only like the main points or the points that I don't want to remember necessarily. Like even with this, like, I'll read the questions and I know the questions, but I'll read it just for, effectiveness. But I don't want to sound like a robot, when I'm on stage, and I want to sound natural. And for the most part, that's also helped me too. So I like that. While still on the topic of you being an attorney in your firm and all that good stuff, is there a specific case that, let's say, you've dealt with in the past or currently dealing with, and as much as you can tell us, that stands out to you, any ones that you're like, man, this one is unforgettable, this will be in my library forever?
Yeah. There was this case that was involving a really young child, and, my client and, the opposing party, the person on the other side, were essentially fighting over custody of this child. And, I'm thinking the whole time, like, the child deserves to be able to spend time with both of these people, right? And, when children get involved in things of that nature, emotions are high, right? This is why I don't do family law. This is why I stepped away from family law. But emotions are high. And, my client just wanted to be able to spend time with this child. And I believe they were extremely, well-intentioned. And, and I'm not going to go into the statistics and the science behind, things as it pertains to, the child rearing process, right? Who they're around, what they're around, and how that forms their ultimate development, right? But my client was a good person, right? And a really good person for this child to be around. And, I believe that the child could benefit from, having time with my client. In my opinion, there was no reason, legally or otherwise, that they shouldn't have had, custody of this child, or at least partial, being able to spend some time. And this dispute had gone on for an extremely drawn out period of time. And I could just see it, tearing my client down. And ultimately we were able to, get a really good result on that case. And it was overwhelming to me because that case ended up going to trial. So that's something that we had that's something that we had to fight, tooth and nail for. But I think what really sticks with me is the picture that I had in my head of my client walking out of the courthouse with that child, carrying that child in their arms.
Man.
Right. And knowing that I actually believed that this connection and then being able to spend time with that child was going to, benefit the child, but also my client deserved that. Right. And, just to know how good of hands that child was going to be in.
Yeah.
I think, in this, I have a heart, right? And there are, certain situations where I'm just like, well, that child should not be with that person, right? But I generally, knew my client. I knew what, their intentions were, and I knew that they were not going to be able to get that result without an attorney, generally. But even more so me specifically, right? So I'm like, imagine how that child's life is going to change, right? Imagine how that child is going to grow up now that that child is going to be at least in partial custody of, my client, the different lessons they're going to learn, the different experiences they're going to have. And in that way, with my work, I'm still shaping the future, right? And there have been opposite situations where people have come to me and I didn't think the child should be placed with them. So it's like, I'm not helping you do that because my name is not going to be on that. Right.
Here goes the integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just, honestly, it made all the work worth it. And this case was tough. I mean, there was a lot of prep that went into the trial. There was a lot of, documents to prepare, a lot of documents to review, and things of that nature. But just if I could just take a snapshot of that moment, and I'm just giving you guys the 50-foot overview, right? Because I'm not going to go into specifics, but it made it all worth it.
Yeah. When you're on trial, do you feel pressure?
Yes. Yes, I do. But I think it ties back to that confidence aspect, right? It's not like I haven't, when I get in, I'm like, it's not like I haven't done this before, right? It's that, but it's also like being okay with the unknown, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that I've prepared as much as I possibly can, and that I have, the requisite knowledge, and also that when I step into a courtroom, God is there with me, right? So it's, a culmination of all of those things. But yes, I do get nervous. But one thing I tell, back to, my coaching at Seattle University, I was just like, never let them see it. And people always tell me all the time, they're like, you never look nervous when you walk into a courtroom. Like, you exude this confidence. And I'm like, you just never show it. Never show it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Speaking of confidence, pageantry. Specifically the one you told me about going to Paris. First of all, Paris is like on my travel wish list that I want to go to. One of the places I want to go to.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the modeling side of what you do and pageantry, and specifically the one going to Paris, and what was kind of that experience like, and what does it feel to have the title of Miss West Seattle, USA?
Yeah. Oh, man. So I started competing in 2019. So I have Miss West King County USA 2019, that title as well. And I started it as a way I was in law school at that point. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be consumed with law school, right? I need to find something else to, effectuate, like I was talking about, that work-life balance, right? Do something else besides, go to law school, right? And so I started competing. So as Miss West King County USA, I competed for Miss Washington USA because there's a hierarchy, right? So you have a local title, and then you can compete for the state title, and then Miss USA, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed it in 2019. That was actually my first time competing. And I think there were anywhere probably from about maybe 35 to 40 girls for Miss Washington USA. And I placed top 15 my first time competing. And I was like, huh, you might be a little good at this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the first time I competed. Then I competed again in 2023 for Miss Washington USA as Miss West Seattle USA. And there are multiple components to, competing. So you have like the evening gown, you have your opening number, you have, if you make it that far, the on-stage question, you have swimsuit, all of these things. But nobody talks about the prep work leading up to that, right?
Yeah.
Like my gym, for an example, I would, work out and, just do my regular workout. And then I would, take my heels, which are probably about 6 or 7 inches, inches tall. And I would go right into like the studio, and then I would go into my pageant walk. Right. Yeah. So during that season where I'm competing, I'm spending at least 2 hours at the gym every day, every morning, opposed to my normal like 1.5, so there's that aspect, right? And then it's like I have to get my costumes together, and it was just this year I ordered my customized dress from Europe. The designer did absolutely great. The dress was beautiful.
Can you tell us what it is?
The designer,
or the like what it looks like?
The dress,
the visual.
I would say that I look like a walking chandelier. It was great though. It was great. It was a crowd pleaser. I was very pleased with it. But even with that, like I had to get alterations leading up, and you have to make sure your dress comes back at a certain time because of those alterations, right? And thank God I left enough time for them, because I ended up having to get it altered more than I anticipated I would.
Yeah.
And there's also the health aspect, right? And so you're eating and, things of that nature, watching that. But, pageantry is meant for women to show confidence, right? Till you get out on that stage. Yes, we know that outwardly you are beautiful, right? But what's on the inside, right? Can you work this stage? How are you doing it?
Right.
And I think, pageantry has, in the past had a bad rep, right? Because people generally think that, pageant girls are beautiful women who have nothing else going for themselves, right? And that's changing a lot. A lot of us are lawyers. A lot of us are doctors.
Little they didn't know about Elle. The walking chandelier. Little they didn't know,
Right. A lot of us are business owners. And I've, had the pleasure of meeting a lot of great women, and we have formed like a sisterhood, especially the ladies from Miss Washington, USA. And, a lot of those pageants can be a little catty, right? Depending on what state you're competing in. But in Washington State, I've had a very, pleasant experience competing here. And some of the girls that I met there are, lifelong friends, and, we stay connected. And it's all in all just a good experience. And I think it teaches you discipline, right? It teaches you to be confident in who you are, especially when you're competing against other women, right? So it's like, I have to be confident in the face of the fact that I'm also competing against other beautiful women, right? Like still just being able to walk in that and say, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. I love myself. And when I go out there on the stage, I'm going to show that, right? And a lot of us do use our platforms for community service and, things of that nature. And that kind of also feeds into, like I said, pageantry is changing, right? We're giving back to our communities, right? And we're using our platform to affect real change in the world. And I think that that's one of my favorite parts of pageantry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quickly before we, because we're coming to the end right here, I'm curious, behind the scenes, because usually, me being one of those viewers, people only see kind of the final product, like you were saying, of you guys walking out, showing out your outfit, your amazing bodies and all that good stuff, and that confidence exuding. Behind the scenes, what is that environment like? How competitive is it with the other girls? Are y'all friendly? Because I know you said Washington's friendly, but other states might not be. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think I've had a really good experience in Washington. And I think that the girls are generally friendly, and it's a generally really good experience.
Yeah.
And the women are very supportive, at least in my experience, right? Oh, you know, your walk looks great. You know, I have someone who's a really close friend, and, you know, someone said before we both competed for Miss Washington, they were like, you guys are friends. You guys are competing for the same title. And I was like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like,
No love lost.
right. And,
Yeah.
you know, still helping each other with our walks, still, you know, giving each other tips and tricks on what we could be doing better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And trusting that, you know, that person really has, you know, your best interest at heart. And like I said, that's what I love about Washington. I can't speak for other states. I only know what I've heard about other states, but at the same time, it is competitive, right? And we are competing, but just because you're competing against someone doesn't mean that, you know, it's okay to be a bad person or to treat somebody, you know, less than or a certain way. Like, I understand at the end of the day, we are competing against each other, right? But if I'm confident the way that I say, I don't need to put somebody down, you know, in that way. And I can still show my support for another person, even though I'm competing against them, right? And that ties back to law as well. Like, you know, a lot of the time opposing counsel, which is attorneys that I go against, you know, in court, I'm just like, before I do this, don't take it personal. Right. And sometimes we'll even talk after and just, you know, chit chat. Other attorneys will take it personally and, you know, whatever. But, you know, I would be talking. I've been on the other side of the table with, you know, prosecutors and things of that nature where, you know, we just be chopping it up and, you know, laughing before, you know, court, and then go at each other's necks in court, and then back after. I'm like, okay, well, you know, what are you doing for lunch?
Yeah,
right. It's just like, you know, there's no need to treat people that way. And, you know, it's a balance. So pageantry,
100%.
you know, the law, life, generally, it's just good to be a good person. You know?
No, yeah, it sure is. Yeah. You can say that louder.
Yeah.
Really loud, actually. Well, Elle, I mean, what a beautiful resume you have, and beautiful things you've said and experiences. We're at the deep end of the podcast, and the deep end is, for anyone still listening up until this point, they're about to get the best question yet, and that's the advice question that I like to end on. Amidst the challenging discipline of being an attorney, you know, being a pageant, being a model, you know what I mean, and all that good stuff that you do, you know, what advice would you give to younger Black professionals that are seeking to either pursue similar challenging fields like you, either be an attorney, either being an engineer, whatever it may be, that are on the come up? And obviously, you know, there are those challenges that we both know of. What advice would you give to them?
I would say to stay true to yourself, and also don't allow people to place you in a box. What you know when you move through life is that a lot of the time people will project their own fears on you, right? And in that way, if we internalize that, we then become limited ourselves, right? Just because they're scared to do it doesn't mean that I'm afraid to do it, right? Or this is who you are, this is where you come from, you're not meant to be in this place, right?
Yeah.
And I've had people, you know, tell me that in direct ways, indirect ways. I've had people in pageantry say, oh, but you're a lawyer. Like, you know, why are you here? And I've had people in law say, you know, well, you're a lawyer, but you're competing in pageants, right? And I'm like, it's not for you to understand, right? And just because you wouldn't do it or you haven't seen it, I'm rejecting that, right? Because at the end of the day, I know myself. I know why I'm here. I stayed true to myself. I know what my purpose is. I know, you know, what my desires are. And if we allow people's fears to, you know, override who we know we are, it could very well have an impact on where you ultimately go in life, right? So stay boundless, continue to break glass ceilings, right? Continue to prove to people that you can, right? And that you will. And if you fail, you're going to get up and do it all over again, or maybe try to do something different, right? And like I said, I've had people, oh, you know, X, Y, and Z, or this doesn't necessarily fit into this box, which we were talking about a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, like that has absolutely, you know, nothing to do with me. And, you know, as a result of me just choosing to continue to have that tunnel vision and moving forward with, you know, where my heart is, I've broken a lot of barriers. And those same people who told me those things at the very beginning, they are now looking at me like, how did she do that? Like,
Yeah.
And I'm looking like, right. And I just keep walking because it's just like,
you didn't believe me.
You're one of the people,
yeah.
And so, yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Elle, thank you. Thank you so much. Before I actually close in this outro, any last comments, any shout outs, anywhere where people can find you, can find your firm, or anything that you want to say before we close?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I would like to thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a very, very pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh man, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and also Facebook. We're Duncan Law Office. We have 2 locations. So in Renton, Washington, off of Grady Way, and then we are in the Columbia Tower, or the Columbia Center in downtown Seattle on 5th Avenue. If anybody needs legal services, wants to reach out, feel free to reach out at 206-237-7714.
Y'all heard her. Oh my gosh. Elle, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope y'all enjoyed that and got some wisdom, some fun, some entertainment, whatever it is that you took away. Thank you so much for tuning into this. It means a lot to me. And I hope you guys stay tuned for some more awesome episodes as we roll on in the Black Experience. Till next time, y'all. Peace. What is up, y'all? Thank you so much for tuning in to that episode. Make sure to click the subscribe, follow button, as well as the bell to get notified on all my new content that is coming out every Wednesday and every other day. And make sure to click that link in the description down below to get access to all my socials and any other platforms that I have my podcast on. And until next time, y'all, peace.